today I am going to discuss about the next two chapters, that is physics. In the previous last two videos we have seen first chapter, second chapter, third chapter and fourth chapter. The first chapter is about what, where, how, why and when we have discussed, and the second chapter is prehistoric theory. And what is the third chapter? Former, huntering to gathering, and then form. This is all about a village. Next, the fourth chapter is Harappan civilization, which is very important to our journey. Harappan civilization. So this chapter is discussed about city. So it is very important to our we have seen. So today I am going to discuss about the next chapter, that is fifth chapter. So today I am going to discuss about the fifth chapter. Okay. Let me go through the PDF. Okay. What is the problem? So the name of the chapter is What Books and Burials Tell Us. In what books we are going to read and what they are going to tell us. That is the fifth chapter. Okay. Let me continue. What is the big picture? So this chapter runs two parallel stories side by side from roughly the same broad time period but from two different parts of the subcontinents. One story comes from the book the Rigveda, composed in the northwest, and the other comes from the Megalithic Burials found mainly in peninsular India. So we are discussing how many chapters? Two parallel stories. Okay, what is the name of the book? What Books and What Burials Tell Us. This is the chapter name. So in this chapter what we are going to see, two parallel stories. One is taken from Rigveda, which is from northwest. What they are telling us about the books and the story from Megalithic Burials. Megalithic, about the burials mainly found at which region? Found in peninsular region, which is in South India. This is in northwest south. Okay. These two parallel stories we will be going to discuss in this chapter. Okay. Next, together they show that how history at any given time is never just one single story. That means it proves different regions were living very differently at the same time. It proves that. Next, the Rigveda. So first we discuss about the Rigveda. So it is the India's oldest surviving text. What is Rigveda? What is Rigveda? What is Rigveda? It is India's oldest text king, right? So let me discuss about this in detail. So there are 4 Vedas we all know about is Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharvaveda. So Rigveda is the oldest, composed in 3500 years ago in an early form of Sanskrit. So it contains over 1000 hymns called suktas. Suktas means well said, composed by sages called rishis. Mostly men through a very few women composed hymns too. So for centuries the Rigveda was not written down at all. It was preserved purely through oral memory. Oral means not written. It is spoken. Okay. So passed teacher to student with extreme precision down to the exact syllable and accent. So because any small change was believed to spoil the sacred power of the hymn, it was only written down many centuries later and printed less than 2000. So if anything believes the power of hymn, then it will be written down. Otherwise it will be told in the oral memory. Okay. Next, let me explain a real life example. So the example is passing down a recipe by memory alone. What for? So imagine a recipe that has never been written on paper for 3000 years. There was a recipe, anything. Let me take chicken. There is a chicken recipe. It was not written from past 3000 years. Okay, passed down purely by a parent making a child repeat every single step and ingredient along exactly. So the grandparent will help to their child to repeat every single step. So until it is perfect, that is roughly the level of discipline used to preserve the Rigveda by memory for over 1,000 years before anyone wrote it down. So without writing, the grandparents will tell to their child until they make good. After that, they will leave them and they will take the initiative as grandparent. They will tell to their child. It is repeated. Have you understood? Like that way, in the previous days, there is no handwritten. There will be a oral memory, teacher teaching to the student. If anything will be think it as power of him, then only it will be written in the paper. Next, what are the language families? Where Sanskrit fits? So Sanskrit belongs to Indo-European language family, the same broad family as Persian, Greek, Latin and English. India also has 3 major language families still spoken today, that is Dravidian, Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, Malayalam. So how many languages India has? So India has 3 languages. Okay. Even today also they are spoken. The first one is Dravidian. Under this we have many languages, that is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada and Malayalam. Okay, this is one of the language. Okay, it is one of the language. And the second language is Tibeto-Burman. Which is spoken in Northeast Asia. And then what we have, Austro-Asiatic, which is spoken in Jharkhand, and Central India parts. Okay, these are the these are the 3 languages that were spoken in India still today. Okay. Veto movement. And then Astro acid. Okay, so where they are going to speak. Dravidian is Tamil, Telugu, Kannada, which we spoke. Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, Karnataka, Malayalis, and then Northeast, and then Jharkhand and Central. Okay. Next, what is the society and economy in the Rigveda? So, we have discussed in the previous class the cattle and horse drawn. Cattle is found in which state? Jharkhand. Jharkhand people found the cattle. Horse-drawn chariots were central to both economy and to warfare. So wars were fought mainly over cattle, land and water, not for large territorial empires. The part of the wealth won in war was offered in Yajnas, that is sacrifices, offerings of ghee, grain and sometimes animals made to deities like Indra. Soma was a plant drink also used in ritual. So next, Eraza, who is the chief at this stage, was very different from the later king. There was no capital city, no palace, no army, no regular tax collection. So some rajas were even chosen with the involvement of tribal assignments. The word Jana and Vish both meant people or community. Jana means people and Vishna means community. Vish is the root of the later word of Vaishyas. Okay. Next, Arya, Dasa and Dasi. The people who composed and sang the Rigveda hymns generally call themselves as Arya. Rigveda hymns, who sang the Rigveda hymns, they are called as Arya, and used the terms Dasa and Dasyu for those who didn't perform these sacrifices and were seen as opponents. So, who sang Rigveda hymn? Let me write it here. Arya. Who is Arya? The people who sang Rigveda hymns. Dasu or Dasi. People who are opponents are. Next, over the word Dasa is feminated from the word Dasi, come to mean slaves. An important shift in meaning to track across the following chapters. Slave will be discussed in the following chapters, and then the river name in the Rigveda is a geography clue. The rivers mostly frequently named in the Rigveda are the Indus and its tributaries, including the Beas and the Sutlej along with the Saraswati, which is mentioned often and with great reverence. So in sharp contrast, the Ganga and Yamuna are each mentioned only once in the entire text. Okay, what is the real life? What someone talks about most reveals where they actually live. So if a person is writing constantly mentions their own neighborhood streets and rarely if ever mentions a city on the other side of the country, you would correctly guess where they actually live. So in the same way, the Rigveda's heavy focus on the Indus, Saraswati and Bees and Sutlej and almost no mention of the Ganga and Yamuna tells us the Rigveda's people world was centered in the northwest, not the Gangatic plans many people wrongly assume. So what is the UPSC angle here? So a very common prelims trap is assuming Vedic culture originated in the Ganga plain. The text itself shows the opposite. So the Saraswati and Indus system dominate, Ganga Yamuna are marginal. Okay, and remember the precise date range. Rigveda composed in 1500 to 1000 BC and before Common Era, and keep this distinct from the later Vedic texts Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharvaveda covered in the next chapter, that is 6, which come from the Ganga Yamuna describe a more evolved hierarchical society. Next, megaliths. What is megaliths? This is burials who are in Peninsula South India, southern story told through burials. So while the Rigveda was being composed in the northwest, a very different tradition was developing in peninsular India, burying the dead under or near huge stone markets called megaliths. Mega means lot and lith means stone. So this practice began around 3000 years ago and is found across the Deccan, South India, the Northeast and Kashmir. So one common burial type is the kist, which is a stone box built to hold the body, sometimes with a small opening called a porthole. Which allowed the burial chamber to be reopened later so that other family members could be buried in the same spot over the time. So along with the body, people placed grave goods, which is a distinct glossy pottery called black and red ware, iron tools and weapons, and sometimes horse skeletons, horse equipment and ornaments of stone and gold. Next, what is the evidence of social difference between Brahmagiri and Inamkhan? So at Brahmagiri, archaeologists found one skeleton buried with an unusually rich set of grave goods, 33 gold beads, 2 stone beads and 4 copper bangles and a conch shell, while other burials nearby contained only a few simple pots. So the kind of contrast is read as early evidence of social and economic inequalities. So some people in the community were clearly wealthier or higher status than others. We all know the rich and poor. So what at Ingaman on the river God, a tributary of the Bhima, occupied 3600 to 2700 years ago. So most burials were laid straight with the bead pointing north, but one probable chief was buried in a large 4-legged clay jar seated cross-legged inside a 5-room house that also had its own granary, a clear sign of higher status even in death. So what is the real life example? Reading a graveyard the way you have read a neighborhood. If you walked through a cemetery today and saw one grave with an elaborate marble monument and gold jewelry buried alongside, right next to several unmarked graves, you would immediately sense the community was not economically equal, right? Archaeologists treat ancient megalithic burial sites exactly the same way. Grave roots are treated as a rough physical record of status. How skeletons are studied. So archaeologists determine whether a skeleton is male or female mainly by studying the pelvic structure, not by looking at ornaments. Not by looking at ornaments, since men are more over jewelry too, and it cannot reliably indicate sex. So ancient Indian medicine also studied in the human body closely. The physician Charaka, who lived roughly 2000 years ago and wrote the Charaka Samhita, counted 360 bones in the human body by counting teeth, joints and cartilage separately. So modern anatomy counts about 200, since cartilage and some fused bones are counted differently today. In the previous days, how Charaka Samhita counted 360, but now that is 200 because there is a difference in the counting. So what here you have to study is megalithic culture and Vedic culture are geographically and chronologically distinct traditions. Don't match them into single angle. So Vedic and megalithic are not similar, so don't equal. Megaliths mostly peninsular India, Rigveda mostly northwest India, so they both are different. And Brahmagiri and Inamgon are the two most commonly cited megalithic sites for questions on early social stratification. Know which is which. Next, the chapter 6. The chapter 5 we have seen about Vedic, Megalithic, and then Inamagon and Brahmagiri, right? And burials and books. In this chapter we are going to discuss about kingdoms, kings and an early republic. So the big picture of the chapter is the chapter tracks a major transformation from small tribal groups slowly turn into settled territorial stages, right? Janapadas, Janas to Janapadas, and some of the which grow into larger kingdoms, from that to Mahajanapadas, around 2500 years ago. Along this side, society becomes far more hierarchical through the Varna system, and two very different models of the governments emerge side by side. Monarchy ruled by one king, and Ghana ruled by many and early of republic. So monarchy and Sangha. So the Ashvamedha we have seen Rigveda, Ashvamedha, Yajurveda, Samaveda. In that, the Ashvamedha, ritual as political power. Around 3000 years ago, powerful Rajas performed the Ashvamedha to prove their strength. A horse was set to loose to wander freely if it passed through another Raja's territory unchallenged. That Raja was seen as accepting the more powerful king. Powerful king's authority. If someone stopped the horse, they had to fight, right? So So this ritual reinforcement a growing hierarchy among Rajas themselves, not just within a single kingdom. So here a simple real life example is a modern version, uncontested versus contested territory. So this works a bit like an unspoken rule between rival groups. If you can walk through someone else's turf without being challenged, everyone quietly understands who really controls the turf, right? The Ashvamedha simply made that idea into a formal, very public ritual test. Okay. Next, the Varna system. A new rigid social order. So the later Vedic texts, Samaveda, Yajurveda and Atharvaveda, composed after the Rigveda in the Ganga Yamuna Doab, describe a society divided into 4 Varnas: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. How many paths? 4 paths. 4 paths: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. So Brahmin study and teach the Vedas, perform sacrifices, who will monitor in temples. Kshatriya rule and fight and protect people, and Vaishya farm, herd cattle and trade, could also take the part in sacrifices. Shudra served the other 3 varnas, not permitted to perform rituals. So priests argued that Varna was decided purely by birth and could never change, but this claim was contested even at that time, including by some kings and by later thinkers within Buddhism and Jainism, who rejected birth-based hierarchy altogether. Women were frequently grouped together with Shudras. When it came to restrictions on ritual study, a separate category of untouchability also developed, applied to certain craftspeople, hunter-gatherer communities and those who handled cremation or burial work. So here an example: rules people are fixed are often the most argued over rules. Whenever a social rule is presented as natural or unchangeable, this is just how it's always been. It's usually a sign that the rule benefits some group more than others, and that it was in fact being actively challenged behind the scenes, right? So the Varna system is a clear historical example. Priests insisted it was fixed by birth precisely because plenty of people at that time disagreed. Okay, have you understood? Next, from Janapada to Mahajanapada. From Janas to Janapada we have seen. Now from Janapada to Mahajanapada. So a Janapada literally means the land where a Jana set forth and settled. So by about 2500 years ago, some Janapadas had grown large and powerful enough to be called Mahajanapadas. Most of them built fort-like capitals with walls of wood, brick or stone. And these forts served 3 purposes at once: defense against attack, a visible display of power and resources, and a tighter control over the population inside. So archaeologists have excavated Janapada era settlements at Purana Khila, which is located in Delhi, and Hastinapura near UP, and Atranjikera near UP, all marked by a fine grey pottery with simple painted patterns called painted grey. Okay. And a new tax system for a new kind of state. So running a Mahajanapada fort, what means officials needed steady resources. So rulers introduced regular taxation instead of relying only on gifts and war spoils. So for farmers, they have bhaga, a share of the crop, usually 1/6 of the produce, and craftsperson, often paid as labor, for example working for the king one day a month, and herders, paid in animals or animal produce, traders, a tax on goods bought and sold, and hunter-gatherers, expected to supply forest produce. So soldiers in these standing armies were paid regular salaries, often using early punch marker coins, a system explored which in the chapter 9 about this. And then farming goods and upgrade. Two changes boosted farm output in this period. The iron plugshare, which could turn over heavy clay soil far more effectively than earlier wooden ploughs, and transplantation of paddy, which produced much higher yields but needed a lot of extra labor, usually supplied by Dasakarmakaras, landless laborer with no land of their own. Magadha. Why one Mahajanapada rose above the rest? Within about 200 years, Magadha grew into the most powerful Mahajanapada. So, three geographical advantages explained. Rivers Ganga and Sun gave easy transport and made the surrounding land highly fertile. And nearby forests supplied both war elephants and timber for building. And rich local iron ore deposits supplied strongholds and weapons. So the key Magadhan rules included Bimbisara, Ajasattu and Mahapadmananda, who extended Magadha's control further towards the northwest. Its capital moved from Rajgriha to Pataliputra. Around this period, Alexander of Macedonia invaded the subcontinent's northwest and reached the river base. So, but his own soldiers refused to march further, reportedly out of fear, facing large Indian armies with war elephants, chariots and infantry. What is the real life example? So, it started beating bigger rivals because of location, not luck. Okay? So, Magadha's rise is a bit like a business, succeeding because of where it happens to be based, good transport link, access to raw materials and a steady supply chain, rather than a single genius nation. So rivers for transport, forests for elephants and iron ore for weapons gave a Magadha a structural head start that rival Mahajanapadas simply didn't have. Next, Vajji and early republic, Gana-Sanghas, which is after Mahajanapadas. Not every Mahajanapada was ruled by a single. So Vajji, which is the capital of Vaishali, was a Gana or Sangha governed by many rulers together, who met and made decisions through discussion and debate in an assembly rather than one person deciding alone. So both the Buddha and Mahavira themselves belonged to such Ganas and Sanghas. Importantly, this was not a modern democracy, so women dasas and karmakaras were excluded from these assemblies. So, a well-known account describes how Ajatasattu's minister Sakhara once consulted Buddha about whether to attack the Vajjis. So, Buddha listed 7 conditions for the Vajjis' continued prosperity: holding frequent assemblies, staying unified, respecting elders and women, and maintaining local shrines, and tolerating ascetics. Implies that as long as the Vajji kept these practices, they would remain strong. So Ganas and Sanghas like Vajji eventually came under Gupta control roughly 1500 years ago. It will be deeply discussed in chapter 11. So what is the real life? Committee decision making versus a single person. Think of the difference between a company run entirely by one CEO, personal decisions, versus one run by a board that has to debate and vote on major issues. So Vajji worked like the second model. Several senior leaders, not one king, had to agree before big decisions were made. So what is the angle? So monarchy versus Gana or Sangha contrast means Magadha versus Vajji is a favorite mainstay on early Indian political system. Be ready to explain both structure and limits. And sequence to remember. What is the sequence? Yajnas, Janapada, Mahajanapada, and then empire. So each stage needs progressively more revenue and administrative machinery. So the tax rate on 1/6 of produce is precise, countable. UPSC likes to test directly. So this is all about 5-6, and the quick reason will be held in 7-8 chapters class. Okay, thank you guys. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe the channel. Okay, please do these all things. Thank you. Have a great day.